Grief has a smell. Most people don't tell you that. It smells like flowers going bad, and casseroles from neighbors, and the specific staleness of a house where the windows haven't been opened because nobody has the energy to open them. It smells like the inside of the suit you wore to your wife's funeral 6 years ago that you had to wear again last Friday. My name is Eric Jack. I'm 60, 4 years old, and I've buried my wife, and now I've buried my son. And I want to tell you something about that before anything else in this story gets told. There is no preparation for it. Not age, not experience, not even having done it before. Each one is its own country with its own gravity, and when you enter it completely, and there is no partial. Nathan was 38 years old. He went to bed on a Wednesday night in early October, and his heart stopped sometime before morning. No warning, no history, no chance. The paramedics told Stacy it was a congenital defect, something in the electrical system of his heart that had been there since birth, and had simply, without consultation, decided that Wednesday was sufficient. I flew in from Lake Oswego Thursday morning. I was at the house on Glisson Street by noon. I want to tell you about the house on Glisson Street, because it matters. Nathan and Stacy had bought it 4 years ago. It was a beautiful house, craftsman style, Laurelhurst neighborhood, 2 stories. The kind of Portland house that has a porch and big windows, and a certain dignity that comes from being well built 100 years ago and well maintained ever since. I had helped Nathan with the down payment, not a loan. A gift, $60,000, written as a check on a Sunday afternoon at my kitchen table in Lake Oswego, because Nathan was my son, and the house was right, and I didn't need the money the way he did. Nathan had never told Stacy where the down payment came from. That was his choice. I didn't ask him why. Fathers don't always need reasons. The funeral was Friday, October 4th. It was a good funeral, in the way that funerals can be good. The church was full. The eulogies were honest. Brett Olson spoke about Nathan with the specificity of a man who actually knew him, and not just the public version. I sat in the front row and held myself together with the same internal architecture I'd used 6 years ago at Margaret's funeral, which is to say, barely. And only because falling apart in public felt like something Nathan wouldn't have wanted from me. After the reception, I went back to Glisson Street with Stacy and Pam, Stacy's mother, who had flown in from Sacramento and who had been managing the logistics of the past week with the efficient grief of a woman who expresses love by solving problems. Gina Dawson, Stacy's closest friend, was there too. The house had the flowers and casserole smell. I was staying in Nathan's guest room. I had my bag, my medication, my laptop. I was planning to stay for the week, to help with whatever needed helping, to be present for whatever presence was useful, and then to return to Lake Oswego and begin the long private work of losing my son. That was my plan. Stacy had a different one. Friday, October 4th, 8:40 p.m. The reception guests had been gone for an hour. Pam was in the kitchen wrapping food. Gina was on the couch with her phone. I was in the hallway with my jacket still on, thinking about making tea, thinking about calling Lyle Morton, thinking about Nathan in the way you think about someone who is gone, in fragments, in involuntary flashes, in the specific shock of remembering that you cannot call him. Stacy came out of the master bedroom. She'd changed out of her funeral dress into jeans and a gray sweatshirt. She looked tired in a way that was beyond tired, hollowed out, which is the right word for early acute grief. She also looked like someone who had made a decision. She stopped in the hallway, looked at me, Eric, Stacy. I turned. Do you want tea? I was about to. I need you to pack your things. I stopped. Tonight, she said. I need you out of the house tonight. The hallway was very quiet. From the kitchen, I could hear Pam opening and closing containers. From the living room, the soft sound of Gina's phone. Stacy. I kept my voice level. Nathan's funeral was 6 hours ago. I know when it was. I was planning to stay through the week. To help. I don't need your help. Her voice was flat, not hysterical, not tearful. Flat and decided the way people sound when they've been working up to something for a while and have finally arrived at the saying of it. This is my house, and I need you to leave. My house, I thought. $60,000 says it was a gift. But fine. Can I ask why? Because I want to grieve in my own home without. She stopped. Started again. Without having to manage anyone else. That was the stated reason. The cleanness of it, The way it was phrased, just diplomatically enough to be hard to argue with, told me it was not the whole reason. But I was 64 years old and I had buried my son that morning, and I did not have the reserves for the argument. Underneath the argument. All right, I said. I packed my bag in 15 minutes. My medication, my laptop, my father's watch, which I travel with always and which was sitting on the guest room dresser beside Nathan's old baseball trophy from Little League that he'd kept all these years for reasons that were his own. I looked at the trophy for a moment, picked it up, set it back down. Don't take it. It belongs in this house. I carried my bag to the front door. Stacy was in the kitchen now, talking quietly to Pam. Gina was still on the couch. She looked up when I came through the living room with my bag, and her face did something, a brief, involuntary register of discomfort, that told me she knew exactly what was happening and had opinions about it that she wasn't going to share in this room. I let myself out the front door of the Craftsman House on Glisson Street in the Laurelhurst neighborhood of Portland, Oregon, on the night of my son's funeral, and stood on the porch for a moment in the October dark. The porch had a swing on it. Nathan had put the swing up the first spring they were in the house. I had sat on that swing the previous Thanksgiving, after dinner, with Nathan beside me in a cup of coffee, and we had talked about nothing important for 45 minutes, and it had been, without either of us remarking on it at the time, one of the best 45 minutes I could remember. All right, I thought. All right, Eric. Move. I walked to my car. I drove to the Marriott on Lloyd Boulevard, not far from Laurelhurst. Portland is not a large city, geographically. I checked in, got a room on the 6th floor with a view of the Lloyd district that was not unpleasant in the October night. I sat on the edge of the bed with my coat still on and called Lyle Morton. Lyle answered on the second ring. He'd been at the funeral. He'd driven back to his house in Teagard after the reception, and had, I suspected, been waiting for this call. Eric, she asked me to leave. A pause. The specific pause of a man absorbing something that surprises him less than it should. Tonight. An hour ago. Eric, I'm at the Marriott on Lloyd. I'm fine, I have my things. I looked at the window. The city lights. I just needed to tell someone. Come to my house. It's late, Lyle. I don't care if it's late. Come to my house. I thought about it. Thought about the Marriott room. Clean, neutral. The specific impersonality of hotel rooms that is either a comfort or a void depending on what you bring into it. Thought about Lyle's house in Teagard, which smelled like old books and his wife Sandra's cooking, and had a guest room I'd slept in twice before under better circumstances. I'll come tomorrow, I said. Tonight I just need to sit here. A pause. Are you actually fine? No, I said. But I'm here, which is enough for tonight. Call me if that changes. I will. We hung up. I took off my coat, lay down on the Marriott bed in my funeral clothes, and looked at the ceiling and thought about Nathan, about the Little League trophy, about the porch swing, about the 45 Thanksgiving minutes that I would spend the rest of my life being grateful for. And I stayed there until sometime around 2 in the morning, when sleep finally arrived and took me somewhere that didn't have a ceiling to look at. Saturday morning, October 5th, I called Howard Beckett at 9 a.m. Howard has been my personal attorney for 21 years. He is 67, methodical, and has the specific quality of a man who has heard most things and is no longer capable of being shocked by the human capacity for poor timing. Eric. His voice was warm. He'd sent flowers. I'm so sorry about Nathan. How are you holding up? I'm okay, Howard. I need to ask you something. Of course. Stacy asked me to leave the house last night, the night of the funeral. A silence, longer than his usual pauses. Last night. Yes, Eric. I'm not calling about that specifically. I'm calling because I want to make sure I understand, legally, before whatever comes next. I paused. Nathan's estate. Do you know anything about his will? Not the specifics. That would be Nathan's estate attorney. Do you know who handled it? Philip Crane. Nathan mentioned him once. He's downtown. I know Philip. He's solid. A pause. Eric, whatever Nathan's will says, and whatever Stacy's intentions are, I want you to know that your position is considerably more protected than she may understand. I know, I said. You know? Howard, I've been quietly managing my own affairs for 30 years. I know exactly what I have and where it is. A pause. Does Stacy know? I thought about that, about the way Stacy had said this is my house, about the flatness in her voice, about the decisiveness of a woman who had already decided where things stood. I don't believe she does, I said. All right, Howard said slowly. Then let's make sure that when she finds out, it's in the right setting. I didn't know it yet. Didn't know that Stacy had already called Philip Crane's office Saturday morning before I'd finished my hotel breakfast to ask about accelerating the will reading. I didn't know she'd spent Friday night on the phone with Pam running numbers she didn't fully understand. I didn't know that the woman who'd handed me my bag on the night of my son's funeral had a plan that she believed was already in motion. She just didn't know about the final section. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to want to be here when that lawyer gets to the final section. I moved to Lyle's house in Teagard on Saturday afternoon. Sandra Morton, Lyle's wife of 38 years, a retired nurse with the practical warmth of someone who has spent her career in rooms where things are serious, made up the guest room without being asked, and fed me a meal I didn't know I needed until I was eating it. I sat in Lyle's living room that evening with coffee, and Lyle sat across from me, and I told him everything. The hallway, Stacy's face, the packed bag, the porch swing. Lyle listened the way he always listens, without interruption, without the anxious, helpful suggestions that people offer when they can't tolerate silence. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Wait," I said. "Philip Crane's office will schedule the will reading. I'll be there. Howard will be there." I picked up my coffee cup. "And then I'll let the process do what the process does." "You're not worried. About what? About what Nathan left her versus what he left you?" I looked at my oldest friend across his living room, 64 years old, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep, missing my son in a way that was going to be the work of years. And quietly beneath all of that, completely certain about the one thing that Stacy Harmon Jack had decided she already understood. "No," I said. "I'm not worried about that." Lyle looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded. Slowly, the nod of a man who has known you long enough to recognize when you know something you're not saying. "Okay," he said. "More coffee?" "Please," I said. There is a specific kind of confidence that comes from incomplete information. It looks exactly like the real thing. The same posture, the same certainty, the same forward momentum of a person who believes they understand the territory they're moving through. The difference only becomes visible when the terrain turns out to be different from the map. Stacy Harmon Jack had a map. It just wasn't accurate. The days between the funeral and the will reading had a texture I can only describe as suspended. Not peaceful. Nothing about that week was peaceful, but suspended the way things are when you're waiting for a process to complete and there's nothing productive to do in the meantime except exist. I existed at Lyle and Sandra's house in Teagard. Sandra fed me. Lyle and I watched baseball. The playoffs were on, which gave us something to look at when conversation became too much effort. I called Howard every other day. I took walks in the Teagard neighborhood in the October mornings, in the specific northwest drizzle that Portland and its suburbs do not apologize for. And I thought about Nathan. I thought about him constantly, not always in grief, sometimes in the involuntary memory way, where you're doing something ordinary and he's suddenly there in full detail. Nathan, at 8 years old, completely convinced he could fix the kitchen faucet himself, flooding the cabinet under the sink. Nathan, at 20, calling me from college at midnight to talk through a decision about his major, because Mom always says call you when it's a big decision, Dad, and this is big. Nathan, at 35, sitting on the porch swing on Glisson Street, handing me coffee, comfortable in his life in the way that is a parent's true and only goal. He was happy, I thought, on those morning walks. Whatever else, he was happy. That matters. That's the thing that matters. Philip Crane's office called on Wednesday, October 9th. The will reading was scheduled for Friday, October 11th, at 2 p.m. downtown on SW Broadway. I called Howard. He confirmed he'd be there. I called Philip's office back and confirmed my attendance. I did not call Stacy. She had not called me. Thursday, October 10th. Lyle drove me to Howard's office in the Pearl District in the morning. Not because I needed the company. I am capable of driving myself to my attorney's office. but because Lyle Morton is the kind of friend who shows up without being asked and doesn't make it a thing. Howard's office is on the 4th floor of a converted warehouse building on NW Flanders, the kind of building that was industrial 100 years ago and is now filled with attorneys and architects and design firms, all of them paying considerably more rent than the industrial tenants did. Howard's office specifically has exposed brick and high windows and the accumulated paper of a man who has been practicing law since before the internet made filing systematic. Howard was behind his desk with my file in front of him. My actual file, the one he's been maintaining for 21 years, which is thick enough that it requires its own dedicated section of his cabinet. "How are you doing, Eric?" he asked first. Because Howard is old-fashioned enough to ask the human question before the legal one. "I'm okay. I'm ready for tomorrow." "Good." He opened the file. "Let me walk you through where you stand, so there are no surprises on your end. There won't be. Humor me." He put on his reading glasses. "Your personal portfolio, the investment accounts, is held in your name alone. Total value as of last quarter, approximately $4,200,000. That's right. The Lake Oswego property, which you own outright, current market value approximately $900,000. The rental income from that property over the past 11 years has been directed into a separate account, currently about $340,000. Yes, the limited partnership stakes." "Howard." I looked at him across the desk. "I know the numbers. I've always known the numbers." He took off his glasses, looked at me. "Does Stacy know the numbers?" "Stacy knows Nathan was an engineer who worked for a good company and had a father who was comfortable." I paused. "I don't believe she knows the specifics. Nathan didn't talk about my finances. That was private." Howard was quiet for a moment. The Pearl District morning outside his high windows, gray, mild, the Northwest October doing its quiet thing. "Eric, what do you expect her to say tomorrow?" I thought about the hallway on Glisson Street, the flatness of Stacy's voice. "This is my house. I need you out tonight." I expect her to have decided that Nathan's estate covers the house, the joint accounts, his life insurance, and that my position in all of that is minimal. I folded my hands. I expect her to believe that she's coming out of tomorrow in a strong position, and that I'm coming out of it in a weak one. And the reality? The reality is that Philip Crane is a thorough man who follows the document exactly as written, and Nathan's document has a final section. I looked at Howard directly. "Nathan called me 8 months ago. He told me he'd updated his will. He told me what the final section said. He wanted me to know." A pause. He said, "Dad, I just want to make sure you're taken care of, whatever happens." He didn't explain why he was thinking about it. He was 38. I didn't push. Howard looked at me for a long moment. "He knew," Howard said quietly. Not a question. "I think he saw things I didn't see as clearly." I looked at the brick wall behind Howard's desk. Nathan was perceptive. He always was. "All right." Howard closed the file. "I'll be in that room tomorrow. Anything that needs a response, legal, practical, anything. I'm there." "I know. Thank you, Howard." I stood to go. Howard stood too, which he doesn't always do, and extended his hand. "Nathan was a good man, Eric, the best of what we hope for." "Yes," I said. "He was." Friday morning, October 11th. I did not sleep well, not because of anxiety, but because of Nathan. Because the night before the will reading is also unavoidably still the week of the funeral, and grief does not pause for scheduling. I lay in Lyle's guest room and thought about my son, and felt the weight of his absence in the specific cellular way that parental loss sits. Not in the mind, not even in the heart, but somewhere deeper, somewhere that doesn't have a medical name. At 6 a.m. I got up, made coffee in Sandra's kitchen while she slept, stood at the kitchen window looking at the Tigard neighborhood in the early October morning, the residential streets, the yards with the fall colors beginning, the particular gray-blue light of the northwest before the sun fully commits. "Nathan," I thought, "I'm going to be okay. I want you to know that." Lyle found me in the kitchen at 7, poured himself coffee, stood beside me at the window for a few minutes without saying anything. Then, "You want breakfast?" "Sandra doesn't need to. Sandra's going to make it whether you want it or not, so you might as well want it." I looked at my friend, 65 years old, Lyle Morton, in his kitchen and Tigard in his bathrobe at 7 in the morning, asking me about breakfast on the hardest week of my adult life. Yeah, I said. Okay, breakfast. Philip Crane's office on SW Broadway was exactly as I'd imagined it. Clean, professional, the neutral ground of a legal office that belongs to no party in the proceedings it hosts. Dark carpet, a conference table that seated 8, a window looking out at the downtown Portland streetscape. I arrived at 1:55 with Howard. We were shown to seats on the left side of the conference table. Stacy arrived at 2:01 with Pam and Gina. She was dressed in a charcoal blazer and dark pants, not funeral clothes, business clothes. The clothes of a woman who is attending a proceeding, not a ceremony. Pam sat 2 chairs away from her. Gina sat on Pam's other side. Stacy looked at me when she came in. One look, quick, assessing the look of someone checking a variable they've already accounted for. Then she sat down and looked at Philip Crane. I looked at her for a moment longer. She's already decided, I thought. She came in here with the ending already written. She's just here for the official reading of something she believes she already knows. Philip Crane sat at the head of the table with Nathan's will in front of him. He was 60. One with the measured manner of a man who has presided over many of these rooms and understands that his job is to read the document, answer questions, and not contribute to whatever emotional weather is already in the space. He cleared his throat softly. The room went quiet. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "We're here today for the reading of the last will and testament of Nathan Allen Jack. I'll read the document as written and address any questions after the complete reading. Please hold questions until I've finished." He began Nathan's estate as Philip read it. The house on Glisson Street, which had no remaining mortgage, a detail I noted for reasons I'll explain, went to Stacy outright. The joint checking and savings accounts approximately $68,000, to Stacy Nathan's personal investment account, approximately $112,000, to Stacy. The life insurance policy, $400,000, Stacy as named beneficiary, was noted but handled separately from the will itself. Stacy's posture, across the table, was relaxing incrementally with each item. The way a person physically settles when things are going according to their expectations. Pam had a small notepad and was making marks on it. Gina was watching the table. Then Philip Crane paused, turned the page, looked up briefly, not at anyone specifically, and then looked back down at the document. "There is one final section," he said. "If you've been listening for a while and you want stories like this to keep coming, hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So thank you, for real." Now, the final section. Stacy looked up from the table. Something in Philip's tone, precise, neutral, but carrying the specific weight of a man who knows that the next paragraph is going to change the atmospheric pressure of the room, had landed. Philip straightened the page. "The following provisions relate to my father, Eric Allen Jack. It is my specific wish that the following be stated on the record and in the presence of all parties. My father has, throughout my life, conducted himself with a financial discipline and generosity that he has never once asked acknowledgement for. The following is an accounting of certain facts that I believe all parties should be aware of, and which I have asked my attorney to present in this reading in the event that my father's position is ever misrepresented or misunderstood." The room was very still. Philip turned to the next page. The down payment on the property at Glisson Street in the amount of $60,000 was a personal gift from my father, Eric Jack, provided in October of 2020. This was not a loan. The gift was made without condition and without expectation of acknowledgement. My father has never sought or received any legal interest in this property, though his contribution to its acquisition is a matter I wish to formally document. Stacy was no longer relaxed. Her hands, which had been flat on the table, had moved, one of them down to her lap, the other gripping the edge of the table with a slight whitening of knuckles that indicates that the body is registering something the mind hasn't fully processed. Philip continued reading. "Furthermore, I wish to ensure that the following information regarding my father's personal financial standing is formally entered into this proceeding, as I have reason to believe it may not be known to all parties and may be relevant to how my father is treated in the period following my death. My father, Eric Allen Jack, has independently accumulated the following: a personal investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $4,200,000, a residential property in Lake Oswego, Oregon, owned outright, with a current market value of approximately $900,000, a separate investment account derived from rental income, currently valued at approximately $340,000, and limited partnership interests in 3 Oregon-based real estate entities, the combined value of which at most recent assessment totals approximately $1,800,000. Philip Crane looked up. The room was entirely, perfectly quiet. The total estimated net worth of my father, Eric Allen Jack, as of the time of this writing, is approximately $8,240,000. I include this information not to embarrass anyone, but to ensure that my father, who has never once in his life announced what he has, sought recognition for what he has given, or allowed anyone to misunderstand his position for his own advantage, is not misunderstood by anyone who might be inclined to do so after I am gone. My father built everything he has, quietly, honestly, and without asking anything from anyone. He deserves to enter whatever comes next with that record clear. Philip set the page down. Gina was staring at the table. Pam's notepad was in her lap, pencil still. Howard beside me was doing the thing Howard does when he is professionally pleased. Nothing visible but a slight increase in stillness. The stillness of a man who has just watched a document perform exactly as designed. I was looking at Stacy Harmon Jack, who had handed me my bag at the door on the night of my son's funeral, who had said this is my house, who had come into this conference room on SW Broadway with the settled certainty of a woman who understood the landscape. Her face had gone the specific gray-white of a person whose blood pressure has done something sudden. Then she fainted. Not dramatically. There was no backward toppling, no knocked chair, no theatrical collapse. She simply went sideways in her seat, and Pam caught her with a surprised sound, and Gina was on her feet immediately, and Philip Crane was already reaching for the phone on his desk to call downstairs for assistance. Howard turned to me. He said nothing. He just looked at me with the expression of a man who has been doing this for 40 years, and has seen many things, and has occasionally had the privilege of witnessing a document do exactly what it was meant to do, at exactly the moment it was needed. I looked back at him. Neither of us said anything. Nathan, I thought, you thorough, careful, perceptive man. You saw it all coming, didn't you? 8 months ago you called me and said whatever happens, Dad. And you meant this. You meant exactly this. I should have pushed. I should have asked you why you were thinking about it. But then, you always were better at the details than I was. The paramedic who came up from the building's ground floor first aid station was a young woman named Torres, who had the efficient calm of someone who deals with medical events in professional settings regularly and is not surprised by the variety of circumstances that produce them. She checked Stacy's pulse, confirmed she was conscious, asked her a set of standard orientation questions, and determined within 5 minutes that what had occurred was a vasovagal syncope, a fainting episode brought on by acute stress, and not a medical emergency requiring further intervention. Stacy sat in her conference room chair with a glass of water that Philip's assistant had produced. Pam was beside her with a hand on her arm. Gina stood slightly back, arms crossed, with an expression I couldn't fully categorize. I was across the table. I had not moved from my seat. Howard was beside me, also not having moved. Philip Crane stood at the head of the table with the particular composure of a man who has just administered the most professionally unusual document of his recent career and intends to see the proceeding through to its conclusion regardless of what the room does in the interim. Torres packed her kit, confirmed that Stacy was stable and did not require transport, and left. The room reassembled itself. Philip looked around the table. I have a few remaining administrative items to complete, if everyone is ready to continue. Stacy said quietly, Yes. Continue. Her voice was different than it had been 20 minutes ago. The flatness was still there, but underneath the flatness, something had shifted, the way a house sounds different after the frame has moved, even if the walls are still standing. She held her water glass with both hands and looked at the table in front of her, and did not look at me. Philip completed the administrative items: executor confirmation, estate tax timeline, the mechanics of transferring the named accounts. Straightforward, thorough. He answered 3 questions from Howard about transfer timing, which Howard had asked not because he didn't know the answers, but because it was useful to have them on record. When it was done, Philip thanked everyone for their attendance, offered his condolences again, and indicated that his office would be in touch with the parties separately for next steps. Pam helped Stacy to her feet. Gina gathered their things. They moved toward the door. At the door, Stacy stopped. She turned around, looked at me across the length of the conference table, across the dark carpet and a professional quiet, and the distance that was both physical and considerably more than physical. "I didn't know," she said. I looked at her. "I know you didn't." "Nathan, never." "No," I said. "He didn't. That was his choice." She looked at the table for a moment, then back at me. "Why didn't you ever say anything? In 4 years, you came to dinners and you were just, why didn't you ever say anything?" It was a genuine question. I could hear that. Not a performance, not positioning. A genuine, confused human question from a woman who was in the process of understanding that she had badly misread a situation for 4 years. I thought about how to answer it, about all the true answers that existed, because it wasn't relevant, because Nathan knew, and that was enough, because I don't measure myself by what I have, because your opinion of my bank account was never something I needed. What I said was, because it wasn't your business, Stacy, and it still isn't. The only person whose business it was is the one who made sure it was in the document. She was quiet for a moment. Then she walked out. Pam and Gina followed. The conference room door closed. Howard and I sat at the table for another minute. "That was," Howard said, "the most thorough act of love I've seen put into a legal document in 40 years of practice." I looked at the table, at the place where Philip Crane had set down Nathan's will. "He was always thorough," I said. Outside on SW Broadway, the Portland afternoon was doing the thing Portland does in October. A light rain that was barely rain, more a general dampness in the air. The sky the particular color of old pewter that is somehow not depressing but comfortable, like weather that knows you. Howard walked with me to where I'd parked on a side street off Broadway. We stood at my car. "What now?" he asked. "I'm going back to Lyle's. I'll stay there another week, maybe 2. Then I'll go to Lake Oswego." I unlocked the car. "I have things to do. Sal's been managing the rental. I need to get back into the partnership reviews. There's a property in Beaverton I've been considering." I opened the door. Life. Howard put his hand briefly on my arm. A rare gesture from him, a man who expresses himself primarily through documents. "Nathan took care of you." "I know," I said. "He learned it from watching me do it for 38 years. And then he did it better, because he did it quietly and I didn't know it was coming." I looked at my attorney. "That's how you know you raised them right, Howard. When they outdo you." Howard nodded. "Get home safe." "I will." I drove back to Teagard. Lyle and Sandra were in the kitchen when I got back at 4:30. Sandra was making something that smelled like chicken soup. The real kind, the kind that takes all day and means someone was thinking about you while they were making it. Lyle was at the kitchen table with a book he wasn't reading. He looked up when I came in. "Well?" I hung my jacket on the hook by Sandra's back door, sat down across from him. Philip read the final section. I said Lyle waited. She fainted. A pause. The kitchen was warm. The chicken soup smell was very present. "Before or after?" Lyle asked. "During." Philip was still reading the numbers, set it back down, looked at me with the face of a man who is deciding whether to say the thing he's thinking. "Nathan put it in the will. Full accounting. Net worth. The down payment on the house. All of it." I looked at the kitchen table. "He said he wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstood by anyone who might be inclined to do so after he was gone." I paused. "He knew, Lyle. He saw what she was. Before I saw it fully. Before it became obvious. He saw it and he built a wall around me in a legal document 8 months before he died." Sandra set a bowl of soup in front of me without asking. Then, one in front of Lyle. Then she sat down with her own. The 3 of us ate in the Teagard kitchen in the October afternoon, and the soup was good, and the rain was doing its not-quite-rain thing against the window. And I was alive, and I had $8 million, and I had 2 good friends, and I had had a son who loved me with the specific precision of a man who had learned that love is most durable when it's documented. Not everyone gets that, I thought. Not everyone gets to bury their child and walk out of a lawyer's office knowing, with legal certainty, that they were loved. I picked up the spoon. "Thank you, Nathan." The days that followed had a different quality than the days before the will reading. Not easier. Grief doesn't ease on any particular schedule, and Nathan's absence was, if anything, more present now that the procedural business was concluded and there was nothing left to attend to except the fact of his being gone. But the days had ground under them again. The way Anthony Hartwell, Jean's father, I'd heard him described once. apparently talked about building on bottom. Something had returned to the floor of things. I moved back to my house in Lake Oswego 2 weeks after the will reading. October 25th. Sal Diaz had kept everything in good order, the rental on the upper unit, the common spaces, the property maintenance schedule. Sal is 52 and has been managing my Portland properties for 9 years with the particular reliability of a person who takes private pride in a job nobody sees. "Mr. Jack," Sal said when he met me at the house, "good to have you back. I'm sorry about your son." "Thank you, Sal. The Beaverton property, you want me to run the numbers on that again, now that you're back?" "Next week," I said. "Give me a few days first." "Of course." He handed me the property folder. "Everything's current, nothing urgent." I thanked him and let myself into the house I'd owned outright for 11 years. The house Margaret had loved for the 6 years she'd been alive to see it. The house that had been rented to tenants, while I spent too much time at Nathan's on Glisson Street, trying to be present for my son's adult life, in whatever ways fathers can be present. The house smelled like itself, like the particular accumulation of years and good maintenance and the specific wood of the floors that Margaret had picked out, and that I had never changed because she picked them and they were right. I set down my bag, stood in the entryway. "Okay," I thought. "Here you are, Eric. 64 years old. Here is what you have. A house you own. A life you built. A lawyer who read a document that your son wrote to protect you. 2 friends who made soup and drove you places and answered the phone on the first ring. And a boy who loved you in the most thorough, careful, documented way a person can be loved. It's enough. It's more than enough. Now get to work." Brett Olson called me in November. The second week, a cold Portland Tuesday. Brett had been Nathan's closest friend at the engineering firm where Nathan had worked for 12 years. He'd given the eulogy. He'd spoken about Nathan with the specificity of genuine friendship. "Mr. Jack, I hope I'm not... Is this an okay time?" "It's fine, Brett. Call me Eric." "Eric." A pause. I wanted to reach out because I know it's been a few weeks and I didn't want to call too soon, but I've been thinking about Nathan a lot and I wanted to see how you were doing. And there was something he told me, maybe 6 months ago. I don't know if you'd want to hear it. "Tell me," he said. We were talking, just regular talking, lunch, and he brought up his dad out of nowhere. He said, "Brett, my dad built everything he has without ever making anyone feel small about what they didn't have. That's the thing I'm trying to figure out how to do." A pause. He said it like it was the most important project he was working on. Like you were the model he was trying to match. "Thank you for telling me that, Brett," I managed. "I thought you'd want to know. He talked about you a lot. He was proud of you." We spoke for 20 minutes. About Nathan. About the work Nathan had loved. About the specific quality of Nathan's attention. The way he brought the same thoroughness to personal relationships that good engineers bring to problems, looking for failure points before they became failures. Building in redundancy for the things that mattered. The will. The final section. 8 months ago, he was already building redundancy for me. After we hung up, I sat in my living room in Lake Oswego for a long time. Not sad. Not only sad. Something more complicated. Something that had grief in it and gratitude in it, and the specific full-bodied feeling of being known by someone who is no longer here to tell them that you knew it. "I knew it, Nathan," I thought. "I always knew it. But thank you for putting it in writing." Stacy called in December 8th, once. I answered. Her voice was quieter than it had been in any of our previous interactions. The management quality was gone. Not replaced by warmth exactly, but by something more honest, something that had been through something. "Eric, I wanted to say something. I should have said it before, but I wasn't in a place to say it before. I waited. What I did the night of the funeral was wrong. You can tell me it's fine, or you can tell me you understand. But I want to say it directly first because you deserve that. It was wrong and it was cruel, and I've spent 2 months thinking about the fact that Nathan knew me well enough to write what he wrote in that document, and that's something I have to live with." I sat with that. The Lake Oswego December. The window. "Stacy," I said after a moment, "Nathan loved you. He chose you. That matters to me because it mattered to him." A pause. "What you did was wrong, and I'm not going to tell you it was fine. But I'm also not going to carry it past the point where carrying it serves anything. I looked at the window. You have a house he loved. A life he built with you. Whatever you do with that, that's yours to decide. Thank you, she said. Very quiet. Take care of yourself, Stacy. We hung up. I sat for a moment, then I picked up the phone and called Lyle. How's Lake Oswego? He asked. Cold. Good. I settled back in the chair. You and Sandra want to come for dinner this weekend? I'll cook. Sandra's already planning what to bring. Of course she is, Eric. His voice had the warmth in it that Lyle saves for when he means something. Nathan was a good man. Yeah, I said. He really was. Gets that from somewhere. I looked at the room Margaret had loved, the floors she picked, the windows that caught the Lake Oswego light, the house that was mine and paid for, and real. It was enough, I thought. Everything that came before, all of it, the building and the losing and the loving and the burying, it all came down to this: a house, a phone call from an old friend, a son who documented his love for his father in the final section of a legal document so that no one could ever take it back. It was enough. It was everything. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories.